Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Tuesday, September 9th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming here from the WellPoint Studios on what is Election Day, preliminary election day, primary election day, whatever you want to call it here in the city of Lowell. But voters are heading to the polls. The polls opened at 7 a.m. this morning, close at 8 p.m. tonight, as preliminaries are being held in 3 of the city's 8 districts: District 3, the Belvedere neighborhood; District 7, the Acre; and in District 8, the Upper Highlands. We encourage everyone, if you're watching this and you haven't done so yet, get on out there and vote, and make sure you tune in tonight at 7 p.m. to watch our live election coverage. We'll tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. First, want to tell you about today's show. We got a lot to talk about, a little bit of a recap, some follow-up from yesterday's discussion, and then a Lowell Sun story that had me shaking my head and laughing. A serious topic, but it made me laugh. Again, I love when people are looking for they've got a solution in search of a problem. Anyway, in case you couldn't tell from the opening shot of the podcast, let me give you the official confirmation. Yes, that is my guest host for today on this Tuesday, September 9th, the empty chair. You know what that means? It's a Trigger 'em Tuesday. We'll call it a Trigger 'em Tuesday Election Day edition of the Daily Pulse. I'll be here by my lonesome, but I got plenty of stuff to keep you annoyed. Let me first thank my Daily Pulse sponsors. We start with Ray Booten. You know the deal, right? Licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to make a deal to buy or sell a home, you need to get in touch with Ray Booten today, and you can find him easily enough online, realestaterayBooten.com. That's realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint for hosting us here in the WellPoint Studios. WellPoint is the only health plan that offers healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, WellPoint. Thank our other sponsors in a few minutes. But let's kick it off today by revisiting a conversation we had yesterday on the Daily Pulse, a discussion yesterday, and that was tonight's Lowell City Council meeting. One of the manager's responses was to a couple of motions where Councilor Corey Robinson and others were hoping that the administration, the city manager's office, the city solicitor would draw up an ordinance that would require, let me make sure I get the wording correct on this here, 25% of the workforce for public construction projects in the city of Lowell to be performed by Lowell residents. And I talked about how on the surface, it, not that bad of an idea, a good idea to put, if you can put extra money in Lowell residents' pockets, then they're going to spend it here in the community. They'll spend it elsewhere, but they'll also spend it here in the community, hopefully more in Lowell businesses than DraftKings.com or their out-of-town pot shops and gambling casinos, etc. But on the surface, not a bad idea. What I wanted to talk a little bit about yesterday is, first of all, how many people will this affect? Are there really that many Lowell tradesmen, that much skilled labor from Lowell that isn't able to find work at a time where you're told we have a massive shortage of plumbers, electricians, carpenters, etc.? Are we just going to shift them from one job to another? And I'm not sure. I still have not received that answer. But I did receive a call from City Councilor Corey Robinson, who was one of the people who filed the motion that led to the response from the manager. And this will be the discussion that probably takes up most of the time at tonight's Lowell City Council meeting, unless they somehow put it off to a later date and kind of fly through. But Councilor Robinson said, listen, he said, it's not a requirement. It's more of a recommendation. In other words, if you can't get to 25%, you can't. You don't have to, because just as we've seen with the Lowell High School project and Suffolk, they're trying to update on what's the number of Lowell residents working on the Lowell High project through Suffolk and the subcontractors, et cetera. How many of them are women? How many of them are minorities? They're never meeting the target, which tells me there are fewer people in those fields interested in working on these projects or for these companies than there are to meet the 25% requirement. So is it really an issue? Are we going to create that many more jobs for Lowellians? But Councilor Robinson made a good point. He said, look, this would also open it up to apprenticeships. I had mentioned apprenticeships for Voc students and whatnot, and how that might not be a bad thing to give these young kids a leg up into the construction industry, help them get their start. He said it does apply to apprenticeships as well. They could go hire apprentices from some of the trade schools and programs. Again, you're helping Lowell, Voc, Greater Lowell Regional High Schools students get a leg up in the workforce. Good stuff. But the part that I didn't like more than anything is the fact that you're now putting a requirement. You're now telling, average Joe's construction, you've got to, when you bid for this job in Lowell, you need to find 25% of the residents to be Lowell workers. And if you can't, okay, but you have to show to us that you made a good faith effort to do so. Is that gonna make bidders more or less likely to apply for projects in Lowell? Will it make those projects more or less expensive? Hint, more. It will make it more expensive. You create more work, you create more requirements, more regulation, you're driving up the cost. If we haven't learned that after all these years of government, then, what have we learned? We know this to be a fact. You're doing it for a well-intentioned reason, as I discussed with Councilor Robinson, but ultimately you're going to make the projects more expensive for the taxpayers. Yes, you're going to make it more expensive for the developers, but these are publicly funded projects. So you're also making it more expensive for the taxpayers. Who do you think the developer is going to pass the costs on to? They're going to work that into their bids. You'll have fewer bidders because the smaller firms won't want to deal with it. I can promise you the smaller firms, the smaller projects won't want to deal with it. So you'll have less competition. You'll have more work requirements, more paperwork, office requirements, more reporting requirements. So naturally the cost is going to go up. By the end of the conversation with Councilor Robinson, though, we kind of both got to an understanding. We got to an area where, maybe this would work better. Instead of calling it a requirement that 25% of the workforce be Lowell residents, perhaps you create incentives around it. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? These companies that are getting TIFs or ties and are getting, a break on their property taxes in return for developing here in the area, perhaps that's less onerous now if you just kind of say, well, if you want to qualify for these, you have to consider this. Again, it will create more paperwork. It'll disincentivize some of these firms to bid on these projects. But there might be some way to do it. Perhaps there's some way to incentivize as opposed to require, right? A recommendation with incentives as opposed to a requirement. Perhaps there's some language there. Perhaps somebody in the business, AKA developers or the city administration, and certainly the city solicitor who has to deal with the legality of this and have to deal with any legal challenges that come up, perhaps there's a way to thread the needle and get the right language that recommends and incentivizes instead of requires that might work. Councilor Robinson indicated to me he's willing to go in that direction. Would other councilors be willing to do so? And is that something that will be discussed on the council floor tonight or pushed out to a subcommittee for further discussion? My hunch is there's a bunch of people who wanted to go out to a subcommittee for further discussion, and that discussion should take place after November 4th, which is election day. Anyway, wanted to follow up on that. I did have the conversation with Councilor Robinson, who reached out to me, and I do think if he's thinking along those lines of an incentive versus a requirement, it's less punitive and might be able to lead the horse to water and actually get that horse to drink. Now, I mentioned Councilor Robinson threading the needle. Needle distribution was another discussion we had yesterday, because there's a couple of motions on tonight's council agenda try to forbid the distribution of hypodermic needles within 1,000 yards or 1,000 feet of a school zone, 1,100 feet of parks. There's a couple of different motions that will get ironed out tonight. My hunch is it'll pretty much pass. But man, did that spark an outcry on social media? We put our story up on InsideLowell.com. Or I should say, I put this show up on InsideLowell.com, and everyone went to town on it, lots of back and forth. Most people agreeing with me that the whole needle distribution thing is a bad idea anywhere, let alone in parks and in school zones. But interestingly enough, 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 𝐿, a recent Lowell High School graduate, I believe he's a UMass student right now, penned a special guest column for us at Inside Lowell, which talked about this and outlined why he thinks not only is it a good idea, he thinks it's a necessity. He thinks they should ban needle distribution programs between your parks and your schools within a certain distance, because those are the areas that your populations, and very much so your underserved populations, need the most, and in terms of the parks, have to use the most. So check it out. It's on InsideLowell.com. Very nice piece by special guest contributor 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 𝐿. Interestingly enough, he emailed it to me yesterday, probably around the time I was talking about it while recording yesterday's Daily Pulse. Thank you, 𝐄𝐥𝐞, for sending that in. I encourage you to continue writing. You're a good writer, and you penned a very logical opinion piece that happened to jibe with my position. But even if not, we've disagreed before, you're able to lay out your arguments in a good way. So please keep doing it. I encourage everybody to head on over and do it. Again, I encourage everybody to head on out and vote. If you haven't already while you're watching this, and it's still before 8 p.m. on Tuesday, September 9th, get out and vote. I trust you're informed enough, because if you're watching this, you've probably seen our debates here on InsideLowell.com. Numbers skyrocketed over the last couple of days of people who viewed the District 3, 7, and 8 debates. District 8 in particular got a lot of eyes and a lot of ears downloading the audio podcast of those. So head on out, vote, be informed, and then when you're done, tune in to Inside Lowell, because tonight, beginning at 7 p.m., live preliminary election coverage here on InsideLowell.com on our YouTube channel. I'll be here along with former City Elections Director Greg Pappas, former Lowell City Councilor and State Rep candidate James Leary. We'll be joined at 8 o'clock by Marty Laurie. By Jerry Nutter. I invited Marty Laurie, but he can't because of work. It's also his anniversary. Happy anniversary, by the way, Marty and Lila Laurie. Jerry Nutter will be here as well, beginning at 8 o'clock when the polls close and the results start to come on in. Jerry will join Jimmy Leary, Greg Pappas, and they'll be joined by former Lowell Mayor Bill Samaras as well to give us a little bit of insight into that highly contested and much anticipated District 3 Belvedere preliminary election. Again, the goal tonight, winnow the fields down to 2. Top 2 vote getters in each race will advance to the November general election, but you can only vote for one. If you're watching this and you're a little bit confused, even though 2 people will move on, you can only vote for one. So vote for your favorite candidate, not your 2 favorite candidates. Otherwise, your ballot is getting tossed. It will not count. All right. Again, that's at 7 o'clock tonight here on InsideLowell.com and on our YouTube channel. We should have the results pretty early for you, by the way, because as soon as the machines in the 6 different voting precincts spit out the results, I've got people at each location. They're going to send me a photograph of those tallies. We're going to plug them into our spreadsheet, and you should be able to see the totals update as the votes come in, precinct by precinct, result by result, and you'll have your results pretty quickly here. I spoke with Director of Elections Will Rosenberry yesterday, and he told me because of any votes that were voted on early in person, those of you who showed up to vote early in person, 213 of you, I think was the number, plus the 158 people who requested mail-in ballots. Any of those votes that come on in before today have been sent out to the polling locations today, and they will be run through the machines. So we should have a really good idea of what the results are, because at worst case scenario, there'll only be a handful of votes outstanding that need to get tallied at City Hall today because they arrived in the mail too late to be sent out to the voting precincts. So my anticipation is somewhere between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we'll be able to call those races and know bright and early who is going to become the two candidates to appear on the general election ballot in November, along with the other districts that have contested races but not enough candidates for a preliminary, and of course the at-large races as well. All right, speaking of the election in Lowell, headline in the Lowell Sun. Let's call it up for you, shall we? Where is that story? Oh, there it is right there. Dun, dun, dun. Federal agents in Lowell spark concerns about voter intimidation. Polls open Tuesday for preliminary election. Story written by our good friend Melanie Gilbert, who, interestingly enough, I asked if she'd be able to join us either yesterday or today on the Daily Pulse, but she's pretty busy, as you would imagine, covering the Lowell election and pretty busy working on this story, apparently, so she couldn't join us yesterday. But this story in the paper today broke on LowellSun.com yesterday. Federal agents in Lowell spark concerns about voter intimidation. Dun, dun, dun. Can you feel the drama? Can you feel the drama? Oh, my. Naturally, the comments on the Lowell Sun page, voter suppression. You know how it all goes. It's all within the story. Go on over there, read the story. I'll read you a couple of comments from it. But as I was chatting with one individual about the story yesterday, and I'll tell you who it was. He's not shy. Greg Pappas, the former elections director in the city of Lowell, said, well, if you're writing a story about voter suppression, that story right there is probably going to suppress some votes. If you believe in the theory of the presence of federal agents in Lowell will spark concerns about voter intimidation and result in people not voting. So from the story itself, a woman named Lorena Betts, who is from what's something called the Peacemaker Initiative, told Melanie Gilbert from The Sun, and I quote, "One of the barriers to voting is intimidation. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement is undermining the work of organizations such as Lowell Alliance, which has been working so hard to increase voter turnout. Now for ICE to show up, it does the opposite." She goes on to say, and be quoted, "There's fear in the community. We know that they not only arrest undocumented people, but they also target people who have citizenship, have green cards. Because of the way they look or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, they end up being taken." Do we have documentation of that? Was that going on yesterday? Was that going on Saturday, as the story said? I hear a lot of fear things, but do we know that that's what they're doing in the community? I don't know. But let me go back to the first part of it. One of the barriers to voting is intimidation. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is undermining the work of organizations such as Lowell Alliance, which has been working so hard to increase voter turnout. Now for ICE to show up, it does the opposite. Is Lowell Alliance working to get illegals? People in the country without the proper paperwork who entered the country illegally or had been invited in by President Joe Biden and others, but have been told by Donald Trump, the new administration, it's time to go, you've got to get out or else we will find you. Are they voting? How is this voter intimidation if undocumented, illegal immigrants, however you want to refer to them, aren't allowed to vote? How are they being intimidated? They're not supposed to vote. If they are intimidated, that's a good thing, right? Because they are not supposed to vote. And how is it undermining the work that Lowell Alliance is doing? Let's put aside for a minute the work Lowell Alliance and all these different nonprofit organizations have been doing here in the city of Lowell to get more people registered and then get more people to vote, because quite frankly, they're failing. I just told you the numbers. There's 313 total people who either requested, I'm sorry, actually, I wrong, scratch that. 371 total people. 158 who requested mail-in ballots, and then another 213 who voted early in person. Anybody who went to vote today could tell you they didn't wait in line for a long time. They got in, they voted, they were out. How are they increasing voter turnout? If they are, if that's their mission, they're failing. They're failing miserably. Failing miserably. I'd love to see how much money these organizations have gotten from the state and or federal government and or the city of Lowell. I know there used to be an organization called Lowell Votes that was working with the city, and I believe getting some city money to get people to register to vote. You had 7,500 people, barely 7,500 people vote in the last municipal election in 2023. I'd say they failed miserably. Judging by the early voting numbers, and again, we need to see the total numbers tonight and then the November numbers, I would venture to say they're failing miserably again. So, I mean, how much money are we going to give them to keep getting lower and lower participation? We got more registered voters. Will Rosenberry told us there's over 77,000 registered voters. A bunch of them are inactive. They haven't filled out the census. They may or may not still be in the city. If they are, they didn't fill out the census, so they're on the inactive roll. And if they do try to vote today, they will, have to show some ID or go through a process to put in a provisional ballot until they're verified as voters. But again, these organizations are worried that the presence of federal agents, and by the way, the agents, we haven't had it confirmed yet that they're ICE. That picture is from the Boston Herald, and it's not from Lowell that the Sun used. But we haven't had it confirmed that ICE was here. We have had it confirmed, according to Melanie Gilbert in that story, that Homeland Security agents were in Lowell. Are they here with ICE? Are they here for something else? Homeland Security works with FEMA. Was there storm damage from over the weekend, those gusts and severe thunder showers that moved through? I don't know. We haven't had, the story does not confirm that ICE agents were in Lowell. It does confirm that federal FEMA officials were in Lowell, but didn't say what they were here for. Were they here for a different investigation, right? There's federal agents in Lowell all the time, gang. Look at just last week alone, there were a couple of big drug busts that got cooperation from state police, and the DEA is in Lowell all the time. The federal marshals come to Lowell. The FBI comes to Lowell. Hell, the FBI was here the other day when they saw an alleged gunman walking around the campus of UMass Lowell. Federal officials are in Lowell all the time. Do we know for a fact that they're here for immigration reasons today, yesterday, Saturday? The whole premise of the story is suppositional. It's out there. It makes an assumption, but is it really a problem? Are we worried about intimidating illegal immigrant voters, undocumented immigrant voters? If we are worried about it, good, we should be. They shouldn't be voting. I don't know if they are. I don't know if they aren't. They are in other parts of the country, but in Lowell, our elections are 100% pure as long as they're not voting. And they know they can't vote, and everybody knows they can't vote, including organizations like the Lowell Alliance. So why is this undermining the work the Lowell Alliance is doing? Now, you want to tell me that legal immigrants are afraid to vote? Well, are they legal immigrants or are they U.S. citizens? Because I believe you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote, don't you have to be? Non-citizens can't vote, can they? So, again, this fear within the immigrant population, and I know there is a fear, right? There are immigrants, whether they're here legally or not, who are afraid. Since January, when the Trump administration made immigration enforcement a big priority, a major priority. But in terms of voter intimidation, if you have to be a citizen to vote, Why would the presence of any law enforcement scare you off from voting? I don't think it does. But I'll tell you what, maybe this article might have scared a few people off from voting because it kind of portrays a scenario that, quite frankly, isn't happening. It isn't happening. No one's trying to stop anybody from voting. Nobody's trying to intimidate voters. There are law enforcement operations throughout the country, and the courts are fighting these battles every day. Just yesterday or a couple of days ago, the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling about the ICE operations in Los Angeles in favor of the president's administration. But either way, come on, that story. That headline is a solution in search of a problem. We all know it. Nobody is going to be intimidated from voting because they're illegal immigrants, because they shouldn't be voting, or even legal immigrants, I don't believe, can vote. You need to be a United States citizen to vote. Do you not? I'm questioning myself now if I'm wrong. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I thought you had to be a citizen to vote. So the story, a lot of scare, a lot of fear tactics, dun, 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 but come on, we can do better than that. All right, tonight's live election show, we told you all about. Let's get rid of this story. Remind you one more time, we go on at 7 p.m. sharp. Tune in on InsideLowell.com. You can see it right on our homepage, or go to the podcast page. You'll see the stream there. You can also watch it on our YouTube channel. And by the way, that is not our only live show of the week, because on Friday at 10 a.m., it's the debut of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse Live. That's right. We're doing the Daily Pulse Live. We're doing it right now, but it's recorded and we drop it at noon every day. We'll record Friday's show and drop it at noon as well, but you will be able to watch it live at 10 a.m. as well. And best part, you'll be able to interact with us because we've got the Shaw Farm Pulse Line, brought to you by our friends at Shaw Farms. They'll be delivering the messages to us just like they deliver their farm fresh products to your doorstep, from their farm to your doorstep. Mark this number down, folks. Keep it handy for this Friday's show, and as we start doing live shows every Friday, you'll be able to participate with us live. The Daily Pulse, the Shaw Farm Pulse Line, 978-PULSE-IN. That's 978-PULSE-IN. I'll give you the number in case you don't have that little alphabet keyboard on your phone anymore. 978-785-7346. 978-785-7346. That's the Shaw Farm Pulse Line. It'll make its debut Friday, along with Lavish Lindsay, our newest podcast member here. She's been our Westford correspondent and our social media maven for the last several months. We're excited to have her make her podcast debut. She's going to be a part of those live Friday shows. She will be the person delivering the Shaw Farm feedback to you here on the Daily Pulse. So with that, we're going to wrap up our show today. I always tell you that I'm here solo, so the show should be a short one. Today, I actually meant it. I kept it to under a half hour. I'm excited here as I look at the clock. I got a lot to do to get ready for tonight. You've got a lot to do to watch this show. If you haven't voted yet, make that time. Head on out there. You're not going to run into any long lines. Get on out there and vote in Districts 3, District 7, District 8, and then tune in here, 7 p.m. tonight. We'll bring you the 1 hour lead up to the polls closing, let you know what we're seeing, what we're hearing. We'll talk to some of the candidates and get you their thoughts as well. And then at 8 o'clock, Jerry Nutter, Bill Samaras, Jim Leary, Greg Pappas, and yours truly will bring you those results here on our show. So for everyone here at Inside Lowell, thanks for tuning in. I hope to catch you tonight as well on our election show. And we'll be back tomorrow to recap the election. Plus, got a big interview for tomorrow with one of the gentlemen from the Frontrunner City Initiative. Mark Keeley is going to be joining us. We've heard a lot about the city, what the city wants and is hoping for and looking for out of this Frontrunner City Initiative. What are the UN people looking? What are the UEF people looking? What are the Frontrunner City people looking for? Mark Keeley is going to join us tomorrow, and he will tell us. Originally supposed to be on Thursday. We're going to actually have him on tomorrow. Going to get him in here a little bit earlier. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Stay cool out there, and we'll see you on the other side.